Amara adjusted the collar of her freshly pressed blouse, staring at her reflection in the mirror one last time before leaving for work. Her heart raced faster than she wanted to admit. Today was her first day at a new job, a corporate position at a financial firm in the city. For years, she had studied late into the night, survived exams, relied on scholarships, and worked part-time jobs to make it this far. She had dreamed of this moment, yet as she tied her hair back and slipped on her blazer, she felt a heavy weight on her chest. It wasn't just first-day nerves, it was something deeper. Amara knew the reality. She would walk into an office where nearly everyone was white. Her resume had impressed the hiring manager and her interviews had gone well, but she had noticed the slight pauses, the faintly raised eyebrows. She wasn't naive. She had grown up in a world where her skin color was the first thing people saw. The idea of having to prove herself twice as hard wasn't new to her. Still, as she grabbed her bag and stepped out the door, she whispered under her breath, "I belong here." The office building stood tall and intimidating, all glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun. Amara walked through the revolving doors, greeted by the smell of polished floors and the echo of hurried footsteps. She approached the front desk, introduced herself, and was directed to the 21st floor. As the elevator ascended, her reflection in the mirrored walls stared back at her, confident on the outside, but restless inside. When she arrived at her department, conversations dipped slightly. A few heads turned. She smiled politely, but the silence lingered too long before someone finally said, "You must be Amara." "Welcome." Her new manager, Mr. Collins, a tall man with grey hair and a practiced smile, shook her hand firmly but briefly. "We're excited to have you on board," he said, though his eyes flickered with something unspoken. Amara was shown to her desk, a neat but modest space tucked in the corner. As she unpacked her things, she overheard snippets of whispers from nearby colleagues. "She's new, right? Did you see her resume? Impressive, surprising." Their words weren't cruel, but the tone carried disbelief, as though she didn't quite belong. By mid-morning, Amara was already knee-deep in tasks, spreadsheets, client emails, financial projections. It was challenging, but she moved through it with steady focus. Numbers were her language. Precision and order calmed her nerves. Still, she felt eyes on her, as if waiting for her to falter. At lunch, she entered the break room where groups of employees gathered, laughing and chatting about vacations and weekend plans. She carried her tray, searching for a seat. For a moment, she thought of sitting at a crowded table, but the half-smiles and sidelong glances told her she wasn't welcome. Instead, she chose a seat by the window, eating slowly, pretending not to notice the isolation. Her phone buzzed. A message from her younger brother. "How's the big day?" "You'll crush it." She smiled faintly, replying, "So far, so good." But the truth pressed heavier. So far, she felt invisible. By the end of the day, her head throbbed with tension. As she packed her bag, she caught her reflection in the darkened office window, composed, professional, capable. But deep inside, a whisper of doubt stirred. "Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe they're right. Number." She shook the thought away. She hadn't worked this hard to surrender on day one. She remembered her mother's voice. "When they don't see your worth, make them. When they doubt you, prove them wrong," stepping into the cool evening air. Amara inhaled deeply. The city lights flickered alive, a reminder that dreams were built here every day, by those who endured. Stronger this time, she whispered to herself, "I belong here, and I will prove it." Her journey had just begun. The next morning, Amara arrived 15 minutes early. She wanted to prove to herself, and perhaps to everyone else, that she was serious about this job. As she stepped off the elevator, the office was still half empty, the hum of computers and the faint aroma of coffee filling the air. She settled at her desk, carefully arranging her notes and logging into the system. For a moment, she felt calm. Then the day began. By mid-morning, the office was alive with chatter, phones ringing, keyboards clattering. Amara was assigned to review financial reports for a long-standing client. She immersed herself in the work, double-checking every figure, ensuring precision. She loved the flow of numbers, how they always told the truth when handled carefully. But as the hours passed, she felt the invisible walls closing in. Every time she stood to use the printer or refill her coffee, conversations hushed slightly. She caught the sideways glances, the faint smirks. One colleague, a tall man named Derek, leaned to another and muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Hope she can keep up. This isn't charity." The words stung like needles, though she kept her face still. During a team meeting, Amara presented her analysis of the client's portfolio. She spoke clearly, walking through risks and opportunities. Mr. Collins nodded, but before she could finish, another co-worker, Rachel, interrupted with a dismissive tone. "Yes, but that's obvious. What's your actual point?" The room chuckled softly. Amara froze for half a second. She wanted to snap back, to defend her work, but instead she steadied her voice and continued. She explained her projections more thoroughly, using data to back her claims. By the end, Mr. Collins said, "Good work, Amara. Let's keep that in mind." The approval was faint, but it was there. Still, the laughter lingered in her ears, like an echo. At lunch, she again found herself alone. She overheard a table nearby where a few colleagues laughed about diversity hires. One voice joked, "Well, HR's got to fill the quota somehow." The others laughed, and Amara's stomach twisted. She stared at her food, but couldn't take another bite. She thought of leaving, of running out of the building, but she forced herself to stay seated. She would not give them that satisfaction. That night back home, Amara dropped her bag and collapsed onto the couch. Her younger brother noticed her silence. "Rough day?" he asked. She nodded but didn't explain. How could she? How could she describe the 1,000 tiny cuts of being doubted, dismissed, excluded, not through outright insults, but through tone, whispers, and subtle looks? She sat in her room later, staring at her notebook. At the top of a blank page, she wrote, "Prove them wrong." It was both a promise and a plea. She didn't just want to survive this job. She wanted to rise, to show that her place here was earned, not given, that her skin wasn't a weakness, but a part of her strength. The next morning, she dressed with even greater care. She braided her hair neatly, put on a crisp white blouse, and straightened her posture. As she left the house, she repeated her mother's words again. "When they doubt you, prove them wrong." But deep inside, Amara knew this battle would not be won in a day. She was climbing a mountain, built on whispers and walls. And though her steps were small, they carried the weight of her determination. The city streets buzzed with energy as she walked toward the towering building again. Each step reminded her, this was not just a job. This was a test of endurance, of identity, of truth. and she was not going to fail. By her third week, Amara had settled into the rhythm of the office. She knew the morning chatter, the hum of the printers, the daily rush to meet deadlines. Yet beneath the routine, the pressure never faded. Every task felt like a test, every meeting like a stage where she was expected to stumble. On Monday morning, she was assigned a project that several of her colleagues had quietly avoided: preparing a complex financial proposal for a potential client. The deadline was tight, and the data was messy. When Mr. Collins handed her the folder, she caught the fleeting look in his eyes. It was the look of someone who wasn't expecting much. Amara spent the day buried in numbers, cross-referencing reports, double-checking every line. Her concentration was intense, but so were the interruptions. Derek stopped by her desk with a smirk. "Need any help? Or is this too much for you?" He said it with the tone of someone pretending to offer support while waiting for her to fail. She smiled faintly and replied, "Thanks, but I've got it covered." Inside, though, she burned. The hours stretched long. While others left at 5, Amara remained, poring over spreadsheets under the sterile glow of the office lights. The building grew quieter, the city outside buzzing with life. But she stayed. It was nearly 9 p.m. when she finally closed her laptop, exhausted but satisfied. The proposal was precise, polished, and ready. The next morning, during the presentation, Amara stood before the room. Her voice was steady as she walked the team through the figures, explaining potential strategies with clarity. At first, some listened with polite detachment, waiting for her to falter. But as the minutes passed, the energy shifted. Her confidence grew as the data spoke for itself: clear, undeniable, accurate. When she finished, there was silence. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Collins nodded with genuine approval. "Excellent work. This is thorough. I think the client will be impressed." Rachel, the colleague who had mocked her earlier, forced a tight smile. Derek leaned back, expression unreadable. For a moment, Amara felt a small crack in the glass wall around her, a glimpse of recognition. But it didn't last long. Later that afternoon, in the break room, she overheard 2 co-workers whispering. "She must have had help," one said. "There's no way she did all that alone." The words sliced through her moment of pride. Even her success was questioned, as though it couldn't possibly belong to her. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea untouched beside her. She felt the weight of exhaustion pressing her shoulders, but also a spark. They doubted her before, and they doubted her still, but she had shown what she could do. No one could take that away. Her phone buzzed. It was her mother. "How's the job going, baby?" Amara hesitated. Then she said quietly, "Hard, but I'm holding my ground." Her mother's voice was warm but firm. "That's what matters. Every step you take, you're planting something. One day, even they will see it grow." Amara closed her eyes, letting the words steady her. The road ahead was steep, the walls still high, but she had found a crack in the glass. And cracks, she knew, only widened with time. The weeks rolled on, and Amara's presence in the office was no longer new. People knew her name now, knew her work, but the whispers hadn't stopped. They had only shifted shape. She was no longer dismissed as someone unqualified. Instead, she was watched, measured, and quietly resented for refusing to fail. Her workload doubled. Projects others avoided seemed to land on her desk. When she completed them with precision, the acknowledgement was muted. A nod from Mr. Collins here, a clipped good from Rachel there. Yet when she made the smallest mistake, like mislabeling a file, the criticism came sharp and public. One morning, Derek leaned over her desk, voice low but cutting. "Careful, Amara. People are starting to think you're trying too hard." No one likes a show-off. She stared at him for a long second, her jaw tightening. She wanted to answer, but she swallowed the words. Not yet. Instead, she turned back to her screen, focusing harder than before. That afternoon, the team prepared for a high-stakes client meeting. Amara had been working on the financial model for days, ensuring every calculation aligned. But just before the meeting, Rachel approached her with a folder. "I'll handle the talking points," she said smoothly, sliding the papers into her bag. "Don't worry, you can sit in and observe." Amara froze. She had built the model, crafted the analysis, and now she was being pushed aside. She considered speaking up, but Mr. Collins walked in before she could. "Let's move, everyone," he said, brisk and unaware. The meeting unfolded with Rachel presenting Amara's work as though it were her own. Amara sat at the edge of the table, silent, her chest burning. She watched Rachel stumble over a few details, numbers Amara knew by heart, but no one questioned it. When the client nodded in approval, Rachel smiled confidently, taking the praise. Back at her desk, Amara felt fury rising in her throat like fire. The unfairness of it all pressed against her ribs until she could barely breathe. She wanted to scream, to call out the theft, but she knew how it would look: angry, emotional, unprofessional. She had been warned by experience. The rules were never the same for her. That night, she walked the city streets long after work, the cold air stinging her face. She stopped by a quiet park bench, collapsing onto it, her hands trembling. For the first time, she thought about quitting. She imagined walking into the office tomorrow, dropping her badge on Mr. Collins's desk, and walking away. But then she remembered her mother's words. "When they don't see your worth, make them. When they doubt you, prove them wrong," and her brother's text on that very first day, "You're gonna crush it." She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. Number. She would not leave. If Rachel wanted to steal her work, let her. Eventually the truth would show. Numbers couldn't lie, and Amara would be ready. By the time she reached home, her decision was clear. She wrote in her notebook again,